Welcome to yet another session of Dr. Spotfire. So, once again, learning is not driven by answers but by questions, and we are really happy to see a lot of questions coming up on our community site with hashtag Dr. Spotfire. And we encourage you to kind of post your questions, and in case you see it's not being represented in a session, you can always email us with the link of what you posted, but we are continuously watching our community for hashtag Dr. Spotfire. This is your team. I am Dr. Vishakha Muju. We don't have Divya Jyoti Rajdev today with us, but we have our assistant professor as Minerva Datta, who kind of is continuously helping us with the post-processing so that you can kind of search your questions. You can get a small video of your questions with the description. So she is the one who is taking care of that. And we have our campaign manager here, Alexis. So today we have our featured presentation using script controls to automate tasks in TIBCO Spotfire. And we have with us Hector Martinez. He's staff solutions consultant who has been with TIBCO for more than 11+ years. He started focusing strictly on semiconductor vertical, but then since then he has diversified into high-tech manufacturing, oil and energy sector, consumer packaged goods, and so on. His previous experience does include 10+ years of experience in semiconductor and high-tech manufacturing, especially with companies Intel, Samsung, Applied Materials. And he has electrical engineering degree from University of Texas. So your Spotfire crew is basically from Palo Alto. So that's what we call as our lab location. And now I pass on the ball to our featured presenter who will start with his presentation using script controls to automate tasks in TIBCO Spotfire.
Great. Can you hear me, Vishakha?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for that. And so my goal for today is hopefully, maybe take 15 to 20 minutes, and here's my proposed agenda. The goal is, of course, to get a high-level understanding of what are script controls and how we leverage them. Of course, everything around scripting and, the script controls themselves, they're all embedded into Spotfire text boxes. So if you have Spotfire and you're able to if there's a button that you select to put in a text box, that's where you will incorporate a lot of your controls, and I'll talk about more of that in my demos. And then of course in those same text boxes, not only can you put text and images and some of the property controls, you can also under the hood you can get to the underlying HTML and modify and edit that HTML. And then, of course, you can also incorporate IronPython scripts. And IronPython scripts is what Spotfire uses to automate some of the functionality. So a lot of the things that a user is able to click on anywhere on your screen, whether it's to set a filter, to create a visualization, or to configure a visualization, we can actually automate that process using an IronPython script. And then finally, we can also execute some JavaScript in that HTML framework. And I'll go ahead and show you some examples of how we leverage all of these things into solutions or into an application that leverages the scripting controls. So let me start off with the very first example. And the first example, of course, is going to be very simple. And the intention here is to give you an idea of how you can leverage a script control. Now, this Spotfire dashboard is a simple parametric dashboard, and it's nothing more than you have a bunch of, I have a tree map that shows a bunch of parameters. You can think of them as KPIs or parameters of interest that you're selecting, and then when you click on it, we can actually just use some of the out-of-the-box Spotfire interactivity where you can drill down into that parameter and view the underlying information for that selected parameter. And down below, we can actually just show the details of that selected parameter via that date range or as a trend, you know, for that parameter of interest. Now, where the script control comes into place is sometimes you have dashboards that you want to allow your user to determine what and how they view an analysis or how they view a specific visualization. And this one, of course, is very, very specific to the high-tech manufacturing space, where a user may want to be able to view not just a parameter over time, but and view the metrics or the limits of where, you know, they should start becoming concerned. And we call these limit parameters or valid or high points or specifications. So there's different terminology for them. But for this demonstration, I just want to show you how we can actually create these controls in a text box. And you can see in the text box I have an image of our logo. I've also added some text, and depending on what you pick, I'm displaying that parameter in this same text box area. But what I'd like to, you know, emphasize is there's some additional things that I've added to this text box, and I've added some controls that allows your user to pick and choose what they actually view. So here I clicked on this all link, and that link is actually a toggle that turns on and off all of these other lines in the visualization. Whether you want to turn them on, all of them off, or you want to be very specific and say, I only want to go look at my valid high settings, or better yet, only look at my high and low specs within my visualization, and also just show the target where the data should, you know, that we're actually targeting. Each of these is a control that a user can come and click and select and change what they're viewing, but under the hood, this is nothing more than a text box that has some properties assigned to those links. And if we look at the underlying text box, you have options, whether you want to view it under this text area or HTML. I prefer looking at it in HTML only because I'm used to HTML. If you're not used to viewing things in HTML, you can view just the text area editor. And what that will do is that'll actually show you that same information in editable form. And you can see here I have these objects that are in here, and these are all property controls. These property controls, you can see a bunch of icons on the top of that dialog that allows you as a user to come in and enter different action or different properties, whether these are action controls, and these action controls can be either functions like resetting or setting your filters or your markings, or pointing them to specific bookmarks that you have in an analysis, or have your user directed to a specific page within a workflow or a report so you can guide them from one page to another. Or you can have them set to execute a data function that leverages our underlying tear engine, or you can actually execute scripts that are written in IronPython, and that's really what these are actually doing. So if we come in here and look at these links that we have in here, and we go look at the properties for them and edit them, you should see that these are properties that are under the hood changing the status of a visualization. And all it's doing is simulating what a user would normally do if they wanted to actually come in here and turn on and off these lines. They would go to that visualization, right-click and go to the properties, or they would go to the properties for that visual. They would go to the lines for that specific visualization, and then they would come in here and either turn them on or off, right? So this is a manual way to come in here and select or deselect certain properties for that visualization. But you can see that when I change something, it only changes the properties for that visualization. And if I wanted to do the same thing for this other visualization, I'd have to do the exact same thing, you know, for that specific visualization. Well, you can create scripts that actually allow you to do it for all of the visuals that you want with a simple click of a you know, whether it's a link or a button that you can incorporate into your text box. And of course, this is a very simple example. Let me show you another example that has a lot more property controls to help users get a better understanding of what they can do for inside Spotfire in their dashboard. Here's another example where we can have, rather than links, we can have buttons execute those same type of property controls. We can have a button that has pre-configured bookmark that says when you click on this particular button, it goes and sets all of these pre-configured selections based off what the user had previously defined, and that helps the user immediately go to that pre-configured selection. But just like everything else in Spotfire, the user is free to go off script and let them select the element that they want to view at any point and interact in Spotfire, because everything's interactive, everything's dynamic. Here's another property selection where they can actually, filter in time. And it just happens that all these visualizations are viewing the information in time. And then, of course, we can put that in a text box similar to, instead of having a filter panel. Filter panel, if you remember, basically every column in your data set has a filter associated with it. And whenever you load any data, those are all automatic for you. But if you want to simplify the interface for your user, you can expose only very specific filters for your user so that way it's just simplified and it doesn't have a lot of information on the screen for them. And then the same thing here is if you want for them to view this information and you want to actually turn on the actual points of the measurements themselves, that you can create a button that allows you to turn on and off those features. You can turn on these little zoom sliders. So for example, most visualizations within Spotfire, you can turn on the zoom selector sliders that you can see on the x-axis. I can either scroll from one side or the other, or then of course I can come in and grab it from the middle and slide through that window. These are what we call these zoom sliders, and of course you can have that available and you can turn it on and off. If it's off, it's basically using autofocus, meaning it'll go to the data itself and zoom in specifically to all the data. And you can turn on and off the y-axis, so you can use it the same way. And again, the goal here is to give you different examples of how you can leverage the different scripts, whether you're interacting with the visualizations, you're interacting with markings. Let's say, for example, here I have multiple selections that I'm viewing 4 different graphs on my screen, and I'm looking at them in a panel. Well, maybe you actually want them superimposed, so you have all of those measurements superimposed on top of each other. Or if you actually wanted to view them in a column, so now each one of them are in different columns, or better yet, you want them stacked in rows, right? So these are all different configurations of the exact same data. It's just different ways to look at the data. And rather than try to create all of these different configurations for all of your different users, you can create a general report and let your users pick and choose how they want to view it. And you give them those options by creating simple buttons or links in the text areas that known as property controls. So these are very simple examples, and if like I said, if I go to the properties for the text boxes, I've already showed you how you can interact with the text box using the edit text area. I'm just going to now show you if you edit it using HTML. HTML is nothing more than viewing what this data looks like in HTML format. Now here, there's really not a lot of HTML in here other than, I have a paragraph. And for those folks that want to become a little more familiar with HTML, there's a lot of HTML tutorials online that you can get, because we are using the standard HTML syntax. And I'll show you a little more HTML syntax in the next example. But the goal here is just to show you, here are all of those different buttons that you're seeing across the top. And if I just go look at one of those examples, so you can see what the IronPython script looks like. You can see this is a representation of an example of how what the IronPython is doing. Ignore all of these little print screens. All the print screens does is to help the user or the whoever's creating the script to run that script, and of course it allows them to get debugging information in this screen down here. But when you actually run it through the button, those print elements completely get ignored. They're strictly just for debugging purposes. Now, as far as the scripts are concerned, we do have a lot of examples in our community, and there's a lot of people that are experimenting or want to learn about scripting. We do have a lot of information on our community. We also have training. If people want to get go into some formal training, we have that as well. The purpose of this call here is to expose this functionality and then, of course, give you some ideas of what you can do with it and show you where you can go to get a little more information. Okay, so this was my second example. Then, of course, everything that I've shown you up to here is I'm showing you how to leverage your text box, how to leverage your property controls, and then, of course, within the text box, you can add links, you can add images, you can add text to describe what you want your users to do. Now I'm going to show you a little more advanced functionality to where, what if you actually wanted to automate some visualizations? And for those folks that have ever looked online and Googled D3, as in Delta 3, there's some JavaScript visualizations that have some animation to it. And here's one example of such animation to where, you know, this D3 visualization is available. And just FYI, Spotfire is able to leverage JavaScript visualizations into the platform, and the only reason I'm incorporating this D3 visualization into this example is because this example is one that allows the user to interact with the data, similar to how Spotfire you're able to interact with the data. But one of the things that it's able to do, it's able to actually animate the data itself, and I apologize if this isn't traveling as well on WebEx as it should, but what it's actually doing, it's going through all of the data set for a specific nation. In this case, it's Afghanistan, through the dates, and of course, my apologies, I accidentally stopped it, but you should eventually start seeing that marker move over time based off its settings. And you can, you know, it's kind of gradual, and it's also under the hood. When there's missing data, it's extrapolating information, so it's moving extremely slow, because in reality, under the hood, there's not a lot of data there. And then you'll start seeing moving violently everywhere. That's because you actually have data, and data's not, you know, when data from year to year, the data itself, you know, is moving like that. Now, this visualization, unfortunately, does not give you the ability to show you the actual path of the data itself. So what I did in Spotfire is I actually recreated that same example, which hopefully you can see here on the right-hand side, for that same subset of data, and you can actually see the path that it's going to move. And if you actually wanted to animate that same type of movement of data, we are able to leverage our same IronPython scripting with a twist of a JavaScript that has the animation timer in the background. But in reality, it's just executing an IronPython script that if you click on this button, you should see the data move. I'm no longer clicking on anything other than clicking on that start and stop. And all it's doing is it's actually cycling through all of the years for this particular data set. And if we go under the hood, for those folks that want just a little more information on how this was done, we can go look at exactly what this, what this script is actually doing. There's two things that are occurring that you're actually seeing. One is the actual button itself that is actually triggering the button. So if you actually click and edit this button, we can show you what the IronPython script that it's actually doing. And my goal here is, of course, I can, I'll hand over this example over to Vishaka so she can put it into our community. So if people are interested in playing around with this example, you're able to use it. The other thing that is happening is, of course, this trigger is a manual trigger of just cycling through the years. So it's actually just going 1 year at a time, and it's showing you 1 year, it's just basically displaying the information 1 year at a time. And of course, all this visualization is actually doing is showing you two different data sets. One, if you go under the properties of it, there's two different subsets. One is actually using the schema or for the filter themselves, and the other one is basically all of the data. So that's the reason you have two groupings here. One is all of the data, and the other one is the, just the data set that you're looking at. So these are the 2 points that you're visualizing, and the other subset is, of course, all of the data. And when I click on this button, the IronPython is actually just going through and viewing one of those filters at a time. So again, the goal here is to give you an idea of what you can do with the scripts themselves. And this was a very preliminary example. And then we wanted to take this, how could we make this into production and make it a little more user-friendly and use it in a real live dashboard? And that's really the last example that I want to show you, where I've taken that same idea of cycling through the filters, and I basically created this demo for a customer as a proof of concept that we can do it. We can, again, I'm using on the left-hand side, I'm using a text box to display images. I'm using a text box to display computed information. I can use a button to trigger and step through all of my filters, and if you actually want to see what that filter looks like, I can just come over here on the right-hand side and go through and show you exactly what is happening when I actually click on that button. So on the right-hand side, I have this production date, and you can see I have it set up as, in this filter, it's actually a hierarchy filter, but you can see it's going through and selecting each individual month, and if I click step, you should see the next month selected, and if I click step, you should see the next step selected. And all that is doing is that when that data is selected, of course, it's being visualized in all of your visualizations. It's also being aggregated in your calculations on the left-hand side. The text box displaying exactly what month is currently being, is the latest month, and how many, how many records are within that current month, as well as the aggregation of it. But what this also allows you to do is it also allows you to do the same thing that I did before, where I can click on the start button and just let it go, and this will now just go and cycle through those filters and continuously add new data to it. And what that does in Spotfire, you start seeing all of that information, start adding that information into my visualization as an animation. So you can see in the graph where new markers are being displayed on the graph itself. In their line charts, it's basically adding information depending on where it lands on the polygon. I'm also using some tear scripts that automatically find exactly where those markers are located within the different polygons, but that's a whole different discussion. For today, I just wanted to give you an idea of how you can leverage scripting, how you can leverage how you can leverage the text boxes, and how you can leverage JavaScript to create some very sophisticated, very nice looking dashboards. And with that, I apologize, I may have taken a little over than 20 minutes, but I'll go ahead and stop right here and hand it over to Vishaka and see if there's any questions for me.
Thank you, Hector. That was really wonderful presentation. So we had a couple of questions which were mostly related to where we can find resources. So Hector, can you make me the presenter? So let me share my screen. So I have already provided the links where you can find the resources. I have also provided, one of the questions was, is there any training available? So I have already provided you these links, which is part of our community. So you can see extended Spotfire, this is already on the chat, IronPython, Spotfire Analyst API reference, JavaScript. And even also I have provided you, so one of the questions we received on community was regarding any training for this. So we already have on 10.tipco.com, on TIPCO education site, we have 2 courses which are related to this. So I have also provided you link for that. In addition to that, we had a question about can S3 map files be used in Spotfire mapping tool. Yes, they can be used. We have already done a featured presentation on map chart visualizations. So I will request Alexis to kind of provide you those links later in an email. Then we had another question about Google Motion charts. We will try to have that in our future presentation, but as Hector clearly told you about how to use JavaScript visualizations. So, and we also had one of the featured presentations done by Andrew in January, where he kind of went through how you can do JavaScript visualizations within Spotfire. And there is a link which kind of talks about how to use the JavaScript for Google Motion charts. We will try to have an example in future, but these would be the links which can help you. Even there is an option where you can use R there. Even in the chat, it was mentioned that you want to use an R Studio. But again, there would be no time today to go through because this will kind of call for a full-fledged session. So in future, we will kind of take care of that. Now I will start with today's questions. So thank you for sending your questions on community with hashtag Dr. Spotfire, and that would be the best way to communicate with us. Use our email only when you want to share data which cannot be shared publicly. So the first preference we give to hashtag Dr. Spotfire, when we see that on our community, that's where we start picking our questions. And those questions, if they require some data which cannot be shared publicly, then we go through our emails. So I have the first question, which is about how to kind of calculate date difference broken down to month. It was really a tricky question even to understand also. So I will start with that question and kind of explain what it meant. So there was a test file which had different fields, different wells, and it had a well start date and well end date. And then what we wanted to know was there was a calculated column which was calculated to find total number of days in 2017. So if you see, each row of data does not tell you anything about number of days of 2017, and your end date could be 2017, it could be 2018, it could be any other year. So even if when I filter out to 2017, my data does not provide me number of days in 2017. The way to calculate for me is if that start date has been in 2017, it could have been 2016. So I have to kind of use that start date and I look at those wells. Either maybe they started in 2016 or even before that. So I have to find only those wells which kind of either started before 2017 and then their end date, or they were still continuing, their end date was smaller than kind of below to 31st December 2017. Not going into that calculation, I just had a calculated column which would do, so that already had been solved. But now the problem is when we have 2017 days, we wanted to calculate, so let me add one more, that I have 2017 days. I wanted to get only the month, only the Feb month or the April month. So I wanted to find out what is number of days that well was in production for Feb month. So you can see this particular well started in 2017 and 2nd of Feb. I have a calculated column which gives me total number of days. So it has been in 319 days for 2017. But I want to find out only for Feb. So for me, in order to calculate that, you can see the number is 13, which is basically 28 days for Feb, and then minus 15, so that's why you are seeing it as a 13. And there could be another well which could have been completely there for Feb, so on we want to calculate. So what I have done here is, let me show you the custom expression. This is like the easiest way. I have used a case statement. So because if a well started in Feb I have to take all the days, like for all the months, it is all the days there, and that's how I have started. But I have started the reverse way. So because that's the way the case statement ends. We have another question which is also related to use of logical function case. So if I show you the case function, you can check multiple functions using case. It has whenever argument 1, then argument 2, and you can have multiple conditions with it. But whenever multiple conditions are evaluated, they are started from left to right order. So your first condition would be evaluated first, then the next. That's why if something is less than 31 days, that means that well started in December itself, I don't have to worry about other months. I simply say, okay, for that, whatever are the number of days in December, that's what counts. But if something is kind of next, if I want to see the next condition, if something is in November, December, I calculate that day for that month minus 31. So that would be the next month. And so on, I go backwards and I reach to the top where I have the January also. But this cannot be a calculated column. This has to be a custom expression because I want it to take one important feature from the visualization, which in this case is month. So I want it to be kind of for each month. So that's how this expression is able to kind of calculate. So this would be one of the ways. There could be other ways also. Maybe your data has more information, or this kind of goes more into date and time calculations. So that would be the way to kind of derive this information, because your kind of data is kind of just the start date and end date, and it requires calculations to figure out how many days the well was in production for that particular field. But this would be the way to kind of approach it. Then there was next question, which was about, again, use of case statement. But in this case, it was use of case statement with property control. So I created a cross-table visualization with flexibility to choose grouping variables via property control. And her grouping variables were gender and treatment controls, and she had an option as none. So whenever you create a property control and you choose column selection, you could add an option as none. But when you use that none option, and what she would have done is she would have created something like this, where, so let me show you the custom expression, where it would be bin by start date, nest, whatever that property value is. So that's where this nest comes in. But when your property value is well or field function, it is able to show you grouping. So in this case, I did not have any data here. I picked up the same data set which I was using in an earlier example. So you have month start date, and then I want to group by well. And maybe then I want to group by field. So that's why I'm simply replacing this nest by the property, which is x-axis property, and that has values as field or well. So I have that property, and I'm able to kind of select, because I have here option. If I say well, I select well. If I click field, I'm able to change it to field. So this property control allows me to switch between well and field. Now, I have not deliberately selected none option. Now let me show you why I haven't done the none option, so that we can recreate the same. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to edit this property control, edit control, and I'm selecting this none option. So it is column selection, test file, select columns. I have used another column which selects field and well, and then I select none alternative. So in addition to field and well, it will have a none alternative, which a user can select. So I click OK, and I save this text area, and you see I have a none option. Now, whenever I will select none, you're saying nest by none. There is, and your Spotfire is expecting a column name, and none is not a column name, so it's not able to find that column. And the moment I select none, the expression is not valid after line 1, character 46, because you are saying, in this expression, you are saying, oh, first is the month start date, nest by none. That's the reason it's not able to kind of do that. Now, if I undo, if I'm here, I had deliberately not selected none, but I can still do what you want to achieve. So when you want group by, I can have a bookmark which kind of uses this expression. So I have a group by which uses this expression and without the none field. So that's why I removed the none field here. So when I have group by, my expression here is the one which you are using. So I have a bookmark which uses this expression. Then I also have another bookmark which says, oh, I don't want any grouping, which is same as saying none. When I click on that no grouping bookmark, you can see if I right click and see my custom expression, it is simply without any nest. So instead of using nest by none, I would say use bookmarks where you can say when it is no grouping, you can say, okay, no need to have the nest condition there or nesting there. And when it is grouping, then you can use the nest. So that's the reason I kind of initially showed you that in that property control, you should not use none as an option. So that's why your error, you are getting this as your error message. So just a quick thing about how do I create that bookmark. I kind of view bookmarks, and this one was this expression. I kind of captured it, called it no grouping. And then when I kind of changed this expression, that time again I captured it, called it group by. So I had to capture this bookmark 2 times, one time with the nest expression and using that property control, another time without that nest expression. And since the nesting is not there, there is no property control there. And then in the text area, all I did was I kind of created a button. So you can see this button. If I edit this control, you can see this button where I can say no grouping. And the no grouping is that bookmark where I had not selected that expression. So this way, when you want no grouping, you are looking at a visualization without that nest condition. And when you want grouping, you are looking at that with the nest condition, and it changes to field. And well, and you should make sure that you do not provide none as an option in this case. So this was the second question. I will move on to the next question. I am new in Spotfire using a trial to learn more about the software. I need to do some predictive analysis like k-means clustering and logistic regression. How can I do with Spotfire? Do I need to use R? Now, since you mentioned about k-means clustering, we already have an article published on how to do k-means clustering with Spotfire, how to do logistic regression with Spotfire. So I will we will follow up kind of sending an email regarding those articles. But I wanted to show you this demo, how we can do k-means clustering. So if I switch this visualization to a line chart, so I have a line chart. Instead of each line by store location, I will pick up store number. And I wanted to have a line. So instead of kind of store location, I might be looking at any kind of, so most recent purchases here. Let me look, because I don't want empty points. So that's very important for while you are performing this k-means clustering. It's very important for kind of you to have that there would be no kind of this, the line should not have empty points, because the lines which have empty points, they will not be included in the clustering calculation. Now, this is something where I won't go into details of like k-means clustering, but what you have is you have these out of box. So I can pick up k-means clustering. I can say which one I want to pick up. So it needs a line chart to work on. So the way you configure your line chart, that is how you will be able to do k-means clustering. So in this case, I am not concerned about what I am representing here, but just want to show you that once you select your line chart, you get an option. Okay, you're using k-means clustering. You get 2 options. How do you want your distance measures to be? Do you want correlation similarity or do you want Euclidean distance? Now, for somebody who is not technical, it is as simple as is the shape where you want to have the similarity. If the two lines have similar shape, that is what you want, or if you want to take into factor the magnitude also. So by similar shape, I mean people may be kind of buying in certain months, people may be not buying in certain months. So somebody may be doing high purchases in April and not doing any purchases in June, but the amount may be like 10 only. Whereas another person may be doing high purchases in April, which may be 10,000, and maybe no purchase in June. The shape may be similar, but the magnitude is not similar. So based on that, you will select your distance measures. You can select your number of clusters, and that's where you can do kind of decrease or increase these based on how many number of clusters you want. So let's say I want only 3 clusters. I can click OK, and you would see it kind of did not include anything. This is specifically what I wanted to show. It did not include anything in the k-means clustering, because for k-means clustering to work, there should be all the lines should have no empty values. So in this case, since it's in each store location, there might be a couple of edges which may be missing in each store location. That's why it does not show up. But if I kind of for each store location, if I look at electronics purchases and then I pick up, so instead of this, what I do is I pick up electronics purchases, I pick up furniture purchases, and I pick up the garden purchases. And here, instead of color, I simply say column names, and I do not use any color. So now I have points for each and every line. So if I go to Tools, K-means clustering, I will update the existing one, and I will click OK, and you can see I have 3 clusters. So I have a first cluster because I have a value for electronics, I have a value for furniture, I have a value for garden for each store number. That's why all the lines were included in the clustering calculation. Now, if you don't have values for each of them, you basically need data preparation. You basically need to have some kind of logic. How do you want to treat your null values, or how do you want to have those? That can be done within Spotfire as well. But for k-means clustering to work, this would be a requirement that all the lines which have all the values, those are the ones which are kind of used in the similarity calculation. Now, another thing is it also adds up a k-means column. So you see this k-means column. I will switch this filter type to a checkbox. So you get a column which is k-means cluster, which kind of gives each row of data, whether it belongs to first cluster, second cluster, or third cluster. And you can clearly see the second cluster is the one where the furniture purchases are high. And I have used correlation, so that's why this line and this line are exactly kind of similar, because both of these lines have the same thing: electronics less, garden less, but furniture high. So if I go back here and kind of go to k-means clustering and then change this to Euclidean distance and then click OK, you can see now it's not, those lines are not there in the cluster 2. Now it's like things which are closer in magnitude, they are clubbing up together. So that would be another way. So depending on your requirement, you can select a required distance measure. Now, another question is, how do I do it with Spotfire is logistic regression. Similar to k-means clustering, we also have this regression modeling and classification modeling. So in regression modeling, you have linear regression and regression tree options. In case of classification modeling, that's where you would find logistic regression. Now, in this, you need to know what is your response column. So what do I want to kind of check? Do I want to check total amount of purchases is my response column, and what is my response level? So total amount of purchases is like so many levels. So if I want to use logistic regression, so do I want to predict gender based on whatever shopping pattern is there? So can gender be predicted based on all these calculations? So I can say my response level is female. and then I can pick which ones I want to include. So can gender be predicted based on the shopping done at a particular store location, store number? So I'm just picking up a arbitrary formula which may not make at all sense, just to show you that how you can do a logistic regression within Spotfire. Now in this case, you have this user-friendly interface, but this formula, you can see this is an R formula where this code is basically how you would execute. So this under the hood, it is using a TER engine which is kind of executing this formula. I can modify it. If I know R, I can kind of change this formula, but this is still out of box. So out of box, you have a possibility of using classification modeling, logistic regression, and classification tree. You have other methods also. And then I can click OK, and you can see it will kind of give me a model. So my model would be created. It will take some time. I can see, okay, this is my p-value. I can see my variable importance plot. I get all these ROC curve. I get all these out-of-box diagnostic visualizations. So I can click, I can see this ROC curve. I definitely see it's not a great model to predict, but I can kind of see this these diagnostic visualizations. And here I'm trying to predict whether somebody is a male or female based on where they shopped, what products they shopped on. So this is where I can see an out-of-box visualization. But it is always a requirement that this may not be something I need. Maybe I need a GBM model, or I need a random forest model, and you can see your out-of-box modeling do not have those methods. That's where I would use a data function. And when I use a data function, so whenever I'm kind of registering a data function, this is where I'm using R script. So this is where you need to know R. So your script would be here. You would pass your data as input parameters, and there could be other things which you want to pass, and then there would be output parameters also which you want to pass, and that's where you use R. Now, I would also like to point to a community link in this case. So if you search for community, there is a exchange. So what we do is we kind of we have this exchange where we kind of, whatever new algorithms or whatever new methods we find out, we kind of post them as a template, where as a user, you don't have to think about R code, you don't have to kind of create anything. All you have to do is replace in that template data by your data, do a couple of tweaks, and it would be kind of ready to use. Say, for example, this is our latest one, which is anomaly detection template. It uses kind of H2O. We have another one which uses random forest, which is this financial crime buster. We have one for separately data function, which is here, random forest template for Spotfire. You have a data function also. These are the one which we have recently posted, and they are kind of very user-friendly. They have kind of instructions, how to use it, how to replace your data, and you can kind of easily use them. So if I click on this one here, in the last session also I mentioned about this, you have details here, you have the reference info here, what is the use case, what are the techniques for anomaly detection, the autoencoder is explained, what is used in there, and then it uses H2O deep learning, and it has all those kind of links which show that. Even this one is also a latest one, which is this random forest data function for Spotfire. This is also which we have published this month only, and every month we are continuously publishing this. So it has an explanation about the variables, it has the description of output parameters, it has a DXP file, and you can replace your data with that DXP file, select your response variable, select your predictors, and you would see the model will refresh. It also mentions what are the TER packages you need. So if there is a particular package which needs to be installed with that, it will have links to those. So that was about this question. Then I got a question which was kind of a strange, which we got like almost 2 weeks back. It was about the same model. So somebody was using that model on Intel i3 PC, and then they were trying that on AMD 8320, and they were getting 2 different results. So we went to our support if we have any known issues with AMD, and they were trying the same model in Excel, and the results were matching with what they were trying on Intel i3 PC. But the AMD 8320 was giving a different result. Since there were no screenshots or DXP files provided, it took us a longer time, but eventually the user provided us the DXP file. So this is the DXP file, and I am right now using Intel machine, not P3, but this is what was expected result, what should have come as p-value. So this is, as per the email, this is what should have been the p-value. But then when I closely examined the AMD one, what I found was in AMD one, the model was using 1 extra variable. I will show you what was happening. It was adding 1 extra variable, and that was, so it was using, the response was not pregnant, the response was pregnancy test, and it was using pregnant in the formula. So it was using pregnant in the formula, and it was using a response variable as pregnancy test. So the moment it used pregnancy test here and it used pregnant here in the formula, which means that your 2 models are different, and that's why the values here you could see as 0.58, 0.72 instead of 0.0, and you are seeing a different model. So that's why I have kind of copied. So Intel versus, there was no issue regarding Intel versus AMD. It was just that 2 people had used different formulas, and it was this formula which was used on the Intel one, and on the AMD one, it was this formula. So it was more of a small error where this particular variable which was added here, or maybe these 2 variables mean the same, but that was the problem here. Then the last question for today, we have this another question from community where I'm struggling with something due to limitation of showing image from URL, and I want to show top 5 products indicated by store regions, and ideally the top 5 should be responsive to filter changes. What he wanted was, I wanted certain rows for those examples which were not LGH product department. So the reason I have kind of added this, if there is product department, and in the product department I have 18 values and it's a list filter, I want to take out one of the values. How would I do that? So this kind of, say if I have a visualization, I select product department here. So product department here, and let me reset all filters. I don't want to pick up this value. Rest everything I'm fine. If I use a checkbox, it will be like picking 20 values or 300 values, but I know which ones I do not want. The ones I want are bigger in number. The ones I do not want are smaller in number. So I just mark those, right-click them, and say marked rows, filter out. So that's an easy way to filter out what you do not require. So that was one thing. Then the store status we needed was 16, 17 only. So because it's just 2 values, it was easier to pick that. Then you wanted something to be, a store name to be picked up. So you can pick up a store name, and the bottom visualization is a details visualization. So every time I pick up a different store name, the bottom visualization changes. So I have that store name, which kind of changes the bottom visualization. And in order to create that details visualization, you just right-click, create details visualization, and I picked up a table. Now, another requirement was you wanted to see only top 5, and you wanted to rank them based on sales. So I inserted a calculated column. So let me show you what I did was I inserted this calculated column. So there is a rank function. I said based on ranks, give me a descending order. The highest one should be 1. And group my calculation by each store. I don't want to be ranked overall. I want separate ranking for each store so that I can find top 5 within that store. And I wanted the ties method to be maximum. It's just when there are 2 stores with the same, how I want to resolve that, which one should be the first one. I used that, and there's more details in our description about the ties method and other rank functions. But you can see when I select this store, I kind of limit my data. So I go to here, I kind of go to data, and then I limit my data by only where the rank is less than or equal to 5. Or I can say only less than 5. Only the ones which are ranked between 1 to 5, those are the ones I want to show. So my marking here, my selecting a particular store number restricts to that store number. And all these visualizations are completely responsive to filter panel. So if you pick up a particular store category or product category, it will only show that product category. And then I pick up a store name. So I am restricted to that store name. And in that, it's only like 1 or 2 or just 2 stores, or I can pick up all. So based on what store name I pick up, I see only those. And then I see the top 5 only based on the sales ranking. So this would be kind of a way which goes into multiple things where you use marking, filtering, you filter out whatever you don't require. You use the out-of-box filter panel. You use a data drill down to create your detailed visualization. You can use a calculated column to rank. And then I would see the most important piece to resolve this question was you limit your data by that calculation. Limit data using expression. So that is what was used here. These will be all the questions for today. Unfortunately, we don't have a DJ who would usually take care of the questions on QA panel, but I can still see some of the questions, and we will kind of send email links for the S3 shapefile or our previous. So you can check our previous Spotfire sessions for the JavaScript featured presentation as well as the geoanalytics. We had 2 featured presentations for geoanalytics where you would see the S3 shapefile also used for the mapping. Thank you for the old timers who have been attending these sessions for a couple of years. So, then can you provide us the DXP shown so we can play with them? We have picked these from community questions, and most of the data is from the customers. We can provide you the links there, and our solutions we can have there, but not the DXP files. But everything which you will require to resolve that, we can provide you those. That is going to be all for today. I can check if there are any other questions on the chat panel. I think all the questions we had on chat panel for today, we have already resolved those. Thank you. Have a good day.